Before the Detroit Pistons started on their Western road trip, I said they should go 3-1. That should be their goal, to go at least 3-1. They went to the final game 3-0. They lost to the Denver Nuggets. Bad loss, but they still accomplished the goal of being 3-1 on the road trip. That is a success. We'll talk about how they played during this road trip in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Ku Khahil. You can find me over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great one. Another great way to support the podcast. I also want to let you guys know to head over to my personal YouTube channel at Ku Khahil. We have some film breakdowns coming up over the next week and a half. It should be a lot of fun. Also, make sure you guys text the number 313-914-6528 if you want to be part of our Locked On Pistons Insiders program. We can text with me every single day. I'll text you guys any updates, rumors, inside information, anything I know. You guys can get it straight to your phone, texted. I'm basically your guys' Woj. You guys don't need to follow Twitter. You guys will just be able to text me. I got you guys hooked up. Also, you guys can head over to LockedOnDaily.com, type in your email, and you'll get a Locked On Pistons daily newsletter every single day with your Locked On Pistons daily podcast. All right, on today's episode, I want to talk about Tobias Harris's play a little later in the podcast, and also I want to discuss that playing Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson more minutes has to be a must for the Detroit Pistons and JB Bickerstaff. They're playing too well. We'll talk about it a little later. But I want to start off with how the Detroit Pistons played during this road trip. Last week, before they went on this road trip, I said, look, we talked about it on the podcast. They might be catching some of these teams at the right time. You know, the Kings had all that drama happening. LeBron coming off that rest. The Suns, Devin Booker's out. The Nuggets dealing with all the stuff they're dealing with. Can they go 3-1? That should be their goal. If they went 3-1, that would be tremendous. That would have been great. That means you would have had to beat 3 really good teams. And they had already accomplished that before they even got to the last game of the road trip against the Nuggets. So it was already a success right after the Kings game. Right after the Kings game, after they pulled off that heroic victory, after Jaden Ivey hit that crazy 4-point play to win them the game. After they did that, that road trip was a success. So the Pistons now find themselves in pretty decent position. They are 14-18. Which, again, at this point in the season, I don't think anybody would have seen them being 14-18. This is just about as good as I think people could have expected. They're tied with the Bulls for the 9th seed. They're 1 game behind the 7th seed. They're in good position. They're in really good position, and it's thanks to how well they played on what seemed to be a gauntlet of a road trip. What was a gauntlet of a road trip, they made it the best they possibly could. And that's why it hurts just even more that if they could have just beat the Jazz, handled their business against the Jazz, you would have been talking about a 5-game win streak. Things would have been feeling even more as good as they are right now. But it is what it is, 3-1. However, I want to talk about the Nuggets game just a little bit. Actually, I lied. Before we get to the Nuggets game, what is some of the major reasons why the Detroit Pistons went 3-1 on this road trip? Well, one, obviously, we've talked about it a lot. Cade played pretty well during this stretch. He had some key moments, etc. We talked about the shot against KD. We talked about the shot against LeBron. We talked about how he got to the free throw line 12 times in a game where he was struggling from the field, which helped him out a lot. But Cade is Cade. You kind of expect Cade to play well and have an impact on the game. It is what it is. The other part that I think really helped the Pistons play well during this road trip was how well Jaden Ivey played. During these 4 games. Now, remember, on the last podcast, I said that, Jaden Ivey started off hot to start the year, but then went and cooled down a little bit. But then he missed those games due to that knee injury. So is it possible that during the stretch where it seemed like he wasn't playing as well, he wasn't playing as well as he was at the beginning of the year, is it because he was dealing with that knee injury? Well, the last 4 games seem to suggest that absolutely was the case. He was not full strength because he looks fantastic and he looks like the player he was at the beginning of the year over these last 4 games. He's shooting 57% from the field over the last 4 games. 55% from three, continues to shoot extremely well from beyond the arc. He actually has only gotten to the free throw line 1.5 times. He isn't getting to the free throw line as much as I expected him to over the last 4 games, but playing extremely well. 18.5 points, 5.0 rebounds, impacting the game. They've needed his scoring. That's something that this team obviously needs. Next to Cade, someone else who can provide some scoring, and because a certain player, which we'll talk about in the next segment, is not doing what you really expected them to do, they need some more help from others. And Jaden Ivey, obviously Malik Beasley continues to play well. Malik has been great. But Jaden Ivey returning after missing the games against Miami, missing the game against Utah, he came back and played against Phoenix, LA, Sacramento, and Denver, looking much more like the player that we saw the first 10-ish games of the year, rather than the guy we saw over the last few weeks that seemed not completely full strength. So he seems to be completely healthy. He seems to be feeling as best as possible, and that is a big reason why the Pistons were able to play so well during this road trip, is that along with Cade playing well, you have Malik Beasley playing well, and now you got Jaden Ivey shooting the lights out and hitting big-time shots. Obviously, the game winner against the Kings played really well, but his overall play over the last 4 games since coming back is a big reason why they were able to pull this off over the last 4 games. Another reason why they were able to do this, and trust me, we'll get to the Denver Nuggets game. I'm going to get there. But another reason why they were able to go 3-1, Paul Reed was their best center over the last 4 games. Paul Reed, their third-string center, was their best big man over the last 4 games. Which it's really tough, or I want to say sad, that he played as well as he did over the last 4 games, and he's probably not going to see the court again moving forward. He's probably just not going to play. And listen, we're reaching really uncomfortable conversations that are going to need to be had about a certain player in their front court. Because look, you're about 32 games into the year. You're in your 3rd season, 32 games into the year. That's a lot of a sample size to feel good about your assessment of a player. And nothing has changed really. From the first year to the second year to the 32 games this year, nothing has really gotten better. And you continue to see such a stark difference when you go to another center when they play on the defensive end of the floor. I think everyone knows who I'm referencing here. But the fact that not only when it happens when Isaiah Stewart comes in, Stu was hurt for a lot of this stretch. Paul Reed, even, the 3rd center comes in, and it's that big of a difference. You have people asking the Pistons to please close with Paul Reed. He was fantastic on this stretch. Let me just read you some of his stat lines. It wasn't like he was averaging 30 points. You don't need that. Like I've said over and over and over and over again on this podcast, the Pistons do not need scoring from their 5-man. They do not need someone who needs post touches. That's not what they need. They need an impactful defender on that end and someone who can make the right passes. Well, you know what Paul Reed did? Let me read you some of the stat lines. Against Phoenix, 3 assists. Hold on. Let me scroll up. All right. Against Phoenix, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, a block in 13 minutes. Against LA, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks in 20 minutes. Against Sacramento, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, a block against Sacramento. Against Denver, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 steals, a block against Denver. And was the main reason why the Pistons made it a game against Denver in the 4th quarter, because Ausar Thompson, Ron Holland, Wendell Moore Jr., and Marcus Sasser all came in and played their butts off defensively, and Paul Reed continued to play as well as he has. You want to know another crazy thing with Paul Reed, who is not known to be as, crazy with the ball skills? The last 4 games, 11 assists, 0 turnovers. He doesn't have a single turnover over the last 4 games, despite the fact he's averaging 2.8 assists as your big man, as your 5-man. As your 5-man. Your 3rd-string big man playing in just like 13 minutes a game. Average those kind of stats, stocks out the roof, blocking shots, stealing the ball, impacting plays, finding the right guy, offensive rebounds, kicking it out, hitting backdoors. He averaged 2.8 assists in around 14, 15 minutes a game. Jalen Duren on the season averaged 2.3 assists, but he's averaging 2.0 turnovers with it. Paul Reed just did that in 14, 15 minutes a game, 0 turnovers, and had more blocks, more steals, and more assists average in the decreased amount of minutes in those 4 games than, look, man, you cannot, I don't see how you can tell the guys in the locker room or feel like you expect the fans to believe you're trying to win if Paul Reed just goes back to the bench and just doesn't play. The team has been much better with Paul Reed on the floor the last few games. So that's why the Pistons find themselves in this position where I had somebody comment a few days ago and say, could I read the comments? Someone commented the other day and said, well, you gotta wait. They're trying to see what Jalen Duren is. Look, Jalen Duren, shout out the podcast. I've tried to be extremely fair to him. I feel like I have. I'm not saying anything that's not true. Okay, I really wanted to give him as much of a chance as possible. But it's been 2 years and 32 games. You know what you have. If he were to develop and become something completely different on defense, that would be what we call outlier development. It's not something that we should be expecting. It's not something the Pistons should be expecting, because nothing that we've seen over the last 2 years, nothing you've seen over these 32 games makes you believe that it's going to change. That's just the simple fact of the matter. So you have some uncomfortable conversations I think you got to have, because the starting lineup, which we're going to get to when we talk about Tobias, continues to play extremely poorly, and a lot of it has to do with the lack of defense in this lineup at the point of attack and the lack of impact defense from your 5 position. And your 2 backup bigs are much better. It's an uncomfortable conversation, but the main reasons why the Pistons were able to go 3-1, Jaden Ivey playing extremely well, hitting that big-time shot and looking like the player we saw at the beginning of the year, fully healthy, and Paul Reed absolutely just being tremendous in his minutes. Last thing I want to say about Paul Reed, against LA, plus 20. Against Sacramento, plus 12. Against Denver, plus 12. Remember, the Pistons were down by like 30 against the Nuggets. He was plus 12 in those minutes. He was a plus 8 against Phoenix. The numbers don't lie, man. The eye test confirms this too. It isn't just numbers. The eye test and the numbers don't lie. So let me know what you guys think about the Pistons' Western road trip, how they performed. Are there some things that you want to change? Are you proud of how they played? How do you guys feel about the center rotation right now? What do you think they got to do? Let me know all that comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. When we come back, listen, I was on board with signing this guy. I wanted the Pistons to sign Tobias Harris. But so far this year, Tobias Harris has been nowhere near what the Pistons were expecting, and he's letting the Pistons down right now. Today's episode is brought to you by Rocket RX. If you're ready to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, Rocket RX has the solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor visits or pharmacy trips, just your conversations with your Pistons podcast host. Everything is delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. Don't have to worry about that. With Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team. Complete a quick 100% online consultation. You could get your free prescription today. So visit rocketrx.com to get started now. It only takes 2 minutes. Right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's rocketrx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off your first order. Terms and conditions apply. Rocket RX. Better sex made simple. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Head over to the YouTube channel. Please hit that subscribe button. We are on our way to 10,000 subs. We are 800 away. We need to get there by the end of the year. Please hit that subscribe button. I really would appreciate it. All the other good stuff, the Locked On Pistons Daily Newsletter, the Insiders program that you can see at the bottom of the screen. Text that number. All that good stuff. All right, so we got to talk about this. Tobias Harris was the Pistons' marquee signing this offseason. They spent a lot of money going and signing him from the Philadelphia 76ers. And at the time, when they signed Tobias, by the way, to that 2-year, $52 million contract, it was a bit of a divisive topic because a lot of people were just like, do not sign Tobias. We don't want him. He sucks. All this, that was the talk from some fans. Then you had other people like myself that were like, what Tobias does on the court is exactly what the Pistons need. They need a 4-man that can shoot the ball. They need a 4-man that can space the floor out. They need a 4-man that actually is a 2024 4-man, not a guy being forced to play the 4 that really should be a 5 or a guy that's too small to play the 4. They need that. They needed that type of player from free agency from this past offseason, and Tobias was the best option. That's what people like myself said. However, so far this year, Tobias has been, and this is putting it probably nicely, an extreme disappointment for the Pistons. Now, let me say this quickly. As someone who's been to games, as someone who talks to people, as someone who knows about things, how things go on and hears about things, I do not want to minimize the impact that Tobias has had as a leader in the locker room and on the court and the culture he's helping establish. Because he is doing those things. I can tell you guys, it is being felt by all the players. They all love having him around. He's really helped them calm down, even at times on the court, try to get them together, calm down, help close games out, like in that situation, in that manner, I should say. So I don't want to minimize that, because he has been a great locker room guy, and they need that. They're trying to set a new culture, and you have to kind of say that it's worked somewhat, because they are 14-18 when expectations were not that high. The over-under for this team was at 23-24 wins before the season. They're already more than halfway there, and it's not even 2025 yet. So you have to assume that that's helped somewhat. It has. And I can tell you multiple players feel the same way. With that said, let's talk about the play on the court, because that's what matters, okay? Tobias is having what may be his worst season in the NBA since his rookie year. Quite literally. This might be the worst season he's had since his rookie season. At the very least, his second season. In over 10 years, he's having his worst season. And this is why I really want to stress to people. I want people to understand this. No one is expecting Tobias Harris. No one was expecting Tobias to be a star. There's a lot of Philadelphia people coming into the Pistons community telling them, oh, you expected Tobias to be the star. Look, I told you he was trash. I told you he couldn't play. I told you he wasn't good, blah, 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 blah. He wasn't good for us last year. This is to help hammer home the point of how bad he's been this year. That's not true. Tobias was good for them last year. He wasn't worth the contract. He wasn't exceptional. He wasn't an all-star, and he struggled in the playoffs. But for the regular season, I just want to read this to you guys, what Tobias did last year during the regular season. You guys will understand why I'm saying this right now, but just give it a second. Last year, during the regular season, he was in the 80th percentile as a spot-up shooter. He was in the 70th percentile in transition. He was in the 71st percentile on post-ups. He was in the 59th percentile in isolation. He was in the 68th percentile on cuts. This was a guy he was scoring. He was a very, I don't want to say elite, but a very good, versatile scorer for the Philadelphia 76ers last year. Just 7 months ago. He was an incredibly good, versatile scorer. If he was simply that, again, no one's asking Tobias to be a star. No one's asking Tobias to be a superstar. No one's asking him to be an all-star. No one's asking him to be a 20-point-per-game scorer. You were expecting Tobias to simply be what he was last year. You were asking Tobias to simply be what he has been for the last 3 years. The same player, just be that. Because while that player wasn't good enough in Philly, that player from last year in Philly is good enough for the Detroit Pistons. That player that he was last year for Philly is not good enough for them. They pay him a lot of money to be more than that, and he was not more than that. But if you took that exact same player from last year and put that player on the Detroit Pistons, they probably are at 500 record right now. They've probably won a few more games right now. The problem is you're not even getting last year's player. And last year's player was the one all the 76ers fans, last year's player was the one that some Pistons fans were like, he's not good. That wasn't good enough last year. He's not even doing that last year. He's playing much worse than he was last year. This isn't, too many people are like, see, told you he wasn't good last year. No, he was good last year. If he was simply that player this year, the Pistons would be so much better. Instead of being in the 70th percentile in spot up, he is in the 34th percentile. Instead of being in the 71st percentile in transition, he is in the 28th percentile. Instead of being in the 71st percentile post-ups, it's a black hole on offense when they go to the post-ups, and he's in the 43rd percentile. Instead of being in the 59th percentile or 49th percentile, whatever one, I forget which one it was, in isolation, he is now in the 25th percentile in isolation. Instead of being in the 70th percentile as a cutter, he's now in the 37th percentile. So this isn't just like a small drop off across the board. This is nearly half, like you're dropping nearly half your spots. Like he's going from 70th to dead ass half of it to 30th percentile. Like it's not even close to what he was last year. It's not even close to what he was the year before. It's not even close to what he was the last 3 years. On catch and shoot opportunities this year, he's in the 42nd percentile. At the rim this year, he's in the 19th percentile on layups. Layups in the 19th percentile. You can't continue to ignore it. You can't continue to act like it's not happening. Tobias is not playing well at all. He's not playing anywhere near to how he played last year for the Sixers, and that was the player the Pistons thought they were getting. Again, he's done great things for the locker room. He's been a good leader on and off the court, 100%. He wanted to be here. He's bought into being a veteran, and you do need that. You absolutely do need that from him, and he's served his purpose in that regard. But on the court, he's not holding up his end of the bargain, and he's hurting the Pistons. If you look at his on-off numbers, it's not too dramatic, because the team is not very good with him on the floor anyways. When he's on the floor, they have a net rating of minus 3.0. When he's off the floor, it goes up just a little bit, minus 2.8. So it's not that the problem. I guess this is the problem. We know what those numbers show you. The problem with Tobias, or the problem for the Pistons, is that Tobias is the only real four-man on this roster. He's the only real guy. You can probably say Bobby Klitman, but I don't think no one's expecting Klitman to play real minutes right now. He's a rookie, and he's in the crews coming off, and no one's expecting him to get any rotational minutes right now. But Tobias is the only four-man on this roster. You've seen them try to play Ausar at the four numerous times this year. It's not went well. Ausar's not big enough to guard fours. His best responsibility is at the point of attack, rotating. That's where he's great at. He's not great trying to guard bigger fours, box out. And that's not what he is. That's not what Ausar is. And he's struggled when he's been asked to do that. It's the same thing with Ron Holland. Ron Holland is now a four-man. Just because these guys aren't great shooters doesn't mean you just put them at the four. That's not what they're best at. Ron Holland can't guard fours like that. He's best at the point of attack. He's best harassing ball handlers. That's what those two guys are best at. Too many people are just saying, oh, just put them at the four. No, they don't work at the four. They're not good at the four. They don't play well. In the minutes that we've seen them at the floor, it's not gone well at all. So if that's the case, you can't take Tobias out the starting lineup. You take the contract, put it to the side. You can't take him out the starting lineup because he is the only four-man. He's the only guy that makes the lineup theoretically work. He's the only one. You can't take him off the four spot. And honestly, I don't really want to take him out the starting lineup because you have to kind of just assume he starts to play better. And because while he is struggling, he still is, like I said, the only guy on the team that can do what you want from your four-man. So that's the problem that they're at right now, is that they just kind of have to hope Tobias pulls it together and he starts playing better. You just have to kind of hope. And there was a stretch mid-season before he went out with that injury for like a game or two, where his three-point shooting did start to turn around a little bit, but then over the last 5-7 games, it went crashing back to the earth again. Now he's back to 32% from three. Now he's down to 42% from the field. He's really hurting the Pistons. If Tobias Harris, I'm telling you right now, if he was playing like the player he was last year, that shot 48% from the field and not 42, that shot 35% from deep and not 32, that scored 17 a game and not 12.7, if he was that player from last year and instead of one we're seeing right now, the Pistons would be probably 3-4 wins better. They would be probably 500 right now, at least. Because there's been a lot of games they've lost narrowly just because they didn't get what they needed out of Tobias, especially the first 15 games of the year. So they're in a position, the solution here, I don't have one. You kind of just have to wait and just hope he plays better. Because again, you don't have no one else on the roster that can do what he does. You just got to hope that he plays better. That's all you got. So, but there's no doubt about it. He's been great in the locker room, all that stuff, but he's not holding up his end of the bargain on the court. So, Tobias, gotta play better. They need more from you. Everyone needs more from you. Can you do it? We'll see what happens. But if you start playing better, you guys will immediately see the difference on the court because that's what they're missing. That's badly what they're missing. Is Tobias to play better. If he was playing better, if they had someone else at that 4-man playing at just at least an average starting 4, because Tobias hasn't even been that this year. If they were having that, they would be looking a lot better. So let me know in the comment section down below, what does the Pistons do about this Tobias Harris situation? Do you guys think they should sit him? Do you think the Pistons should go out and trade for a 4-man? Do you think they should just ride it out and hope he plays better and just see what happens? Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. When we come back, the Pistons have to play Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson a lot more. They just got to. They got to find a way. We'll talk about it when we come back. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. 2 guys that need to be playing more is Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson. In this game against the Denver Nuggets, it was a close game. It was a close game until about the third quarter, midway through the third. And Russell Westbrook, to put it lightly, straight up punked the Pistons. Straight up punked them. He basically said, "You guys aren't man enough for me." That's basically what he did. And the Pistons starters, the broadcast said it. This would be a great way to see how they respond. Will they wilter? Will they fall to the pressure? Or will they respond by, letting them know, "I don't know who you're talking to. You ain't going to punk us." Well, the worst case scenario happened. They absolutely wiltered, and they ended up not even playing the entire fourth quarter. He sat Cade, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Tobias Harris, THJ, and Malik Beasley, all the entire fourth quarter. The entire fourth quarter. Didn't play them. Because of how badly they looked in that third quarter and how badly they got punked. And the Pistons were down by a decent margin during that game. Pretty decent margin. In the game, everyone was saying, "Oh, they waved the white flag at the beginning of the fourth quarter. That game's over. You might as well just turn it off." Well, actually, in the fourth quarter, the Pistons got it to a pretty close game and made the Nuggets pull all their starters back into the game because the Pistons reserves had made it a legit game. And when I say the Pistons reserves, really what I'm saying is Ron Holland, a lineup led by Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson, got that lead down to 10 points with 4.5 minutes left in the game. They even got it down to a 7-point game with 2.5 minutes to go. Now, again, they did end up losing. Michael Porter Jr. hit quite a few clutch shots for them, which, by the way, may be a tryout for the Pistons. MPJ, there's someone that could really do what they need from someone at the 4, but, it is what it is. I won't say nothing. But why were they able to get that game closer than it was? And why were they able to gain some of that embarrassment back from getting punked by Russell Westbrook? Well, it was because Ron Holland played exceptional, 5 of 9 in that fourth quarter, had 12 points, and Ausar Thompson was all over the place defensively. Him and Ron Holland were fantastic defensively. And in this game, Ausar had a really nice game. Obviously, he had that crazy highlight, crossed the dude up, broke his ankles, and then dunked on him. Fantastic. In this game, Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson. In a game, the Pistons were once down by 20 plus. Ausar was a plus 12 in his minutes, played 24 minutes. And Ron Holland was even in his minutes, 20 minutes of action. The Pistons ended up losing by 13. You have to play Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson more for this simple reason only. It's not just this reason, but this reason is more important now after what you just saw happen against Denver. Those guys aren't going to get punked. There's nobody out there that's going to punk them. It's just not going to happen. If Russell Westbrook tried doing that to Ron Holland, I'm sure they probably both would have got ejected because they would have started swinging on each other. It just wasn't going to happen. You weren't going to punk Ron Holland, and you're not going to punk Ausar either. Nobody's going to go out there and do that. And the Pistons, based on what we saw against Denver, don't really have anybody outside of them and Isaiah Stewart that were ready to fight back, to swing back at Russell Westbrook, trying to punk them. So that's the emotional reason. That's the emotional reason after Denver. The real reason why you got to play Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson together is you need the defense. Like, the Pistons can't keep punting on defense. They just can't keep doing it. Ausar Thompson and Ron Holland, when they come into the game, they completely wreck the game defensively. And you saw in the fourth quarter, those guys were sharing the court. This wasn't one of them on the floor and the other one off. They shared the court. And what were they making happen? Now, yes, Ron Holland did hit a pull-up or hit a catch-and-shoot three, which helps. If they can hit catch-and-shoot threes, that helps. But they were creating a bunch of turnovers. They were getting out in transition. They were forcing stops and then running in the early shot clock. That getting stops and pushing the ball, getting fast break layups, getting dunks. That's what they were doing. Moving the ball in the half court, getting offensive rebounds, putting it back up, getting cuts to the basket. That's what they were doing in that fourth quarter with them both on the floor. Those guys are the only ones at the wing position that can do that. Tim Hardaway Jr. isn't doing it. THJ ain't doing it. Malik ain't doing it. Simone ain't doing it. Those two guys are the Pistons' best perimeter defenders, and right now, the biggest weakness in their starting lineup, and the biggest weakness I would say on this team, because they don't get played enough, is their point of attack defense. But the Pistons have the solution on their roster, Ausar and Ron. But before this game, Ron Holland is averaging, let's just look at how many minutes he played over the last few games. Against Sacramento, 7 minutes. LA, 13 minutes. Phoenix, 14. Utah, 13. It's not enough. Not enough. And again, this is coming from somebody at the beginning of the year that thought Ron Holland shouldn't be in the rotation because he's a rookie, he's 18 years old, and you don't need to ask that much out of him. But he's gotten better and better and better as the season went on. So yes, play him more. And this is Ausar Thompson. Last 4 games. 18 minutes, 16 minutes, 14 minutes, 20 minutes. Not enough. Not going to lie to you. Not enough. Ausar and Ron need to be playing both easily 20-plus minutes a game, easily. And then I would like them to be up towards 24 minutes a game. Not going to lie to you. And if that means you have to play them on the floor together, so be it. Absolutely so be it. Hopefully they become your Amen Thompson and Tari Eason for the Detroit Pistons. Hopefully that's what they become. That should be the goal. That should be the idea. But this starting lineup has to get changed because despite the fact that the Pistons were 3-1 during this road trip, it wasn't because the starting lineup played well. They continue to get dominated. This starting lineup is being outscored by 4 points per 100 possessions. Not great. They continue to get beat in the bench, and a combination of the starting lineup with other players ends up getting them back into the game and winning the game. It's not because the Stars are playing well. They haven't played well all year together. It's not happening. They don't got enough defense. It's trash. So you got to play Ausar and Ron Holland. Not going to lie to you. You just got to. You got to use their defense. You need their attitude. You need their athleticism and transition. You need all of that from them. So play Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson more. And if you want to be just frank, they play some of the hardest of anybody on the team. I don't know if there's many other players on the team that play harder than them. And I'm close to just saying that, like, with utmost confidence, I kind of believe this already, but they're just some of your better players, like, simple as that. Like, they're going to impact the game more than a lot of these other players, especially some of the players that are in your starting lineup. They're going to impact the game more. They're just flat better right now. So play those guys more. I understand they're young. I understand they can't shoot right now. I understand maybe wonky in the half court. But like we saw in this fourth quarter against Denver, they can make plays happen in defense. They can make these plays happen in transition. They can get out on fast break. All kinds of other ways they can make stuff happen at the rim. Ausar can take up some of the ball handling responsibilities. You just got to play him some more. You need the defense. You can't keep punting on defense. So let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. Do you guys agree? Should you play Ausar Thompson and Ron Holland more? And whose minutes should you be cutting? I'll tell you guys the answer to that one right now. Don't even need to hear from you guys. It's THA and Tobias. Cut their minutes. And then if you need to, cut Simone's minutes as well, because Simone has not been good this year. Every time he puts the ball on the floor, it's a turnover. Guaranteed. Like 99.9% of the time, anytime Simone Fontecchio dribbles the ball, it's a turnover. And he's not shooting well enough to deal with it. So there's the answer. I don't even want to hear it. I'm not even asking you guys. The answer is Simone Fontecchio loses his minutes, THJ loses some minutes, and Tobias loses some minutes. And you give all of those minutes to Ron Holland and Ausar Thompson. Simple as that. So let me know, again, comment section down below how you guys feel about that. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button at the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Till next time, peace out.